change. As Brit mentioned, Little Green Thumbs was given the opportunity to create this project with assistance from Environment and Climate Change Canada as kind of a signature project for them with their Climate Action Fund to, really connect the dots for people, especially at this grade level, grade 3, connecting to habitat. We'll kind of go over the rationale for the curriculum connections there, but helping to create a resource more for our younger years to explore such a difficult topic that a lot of teachers instantly are scared to even mention or consider with these kids because of the worries about, finding it a traumatic experience. It's not an easy topic. So what we hope to do with this is the idea of connecting plants, people, and planet. We're also looking at causes, impacts, and solutions to climate change. Go ahead for the next slide there, Brett. So who's currently teaching climate change in the classroom? Maybe just if you can do, the hands up would be awesome, or even just put in the chat if you're doing any sort of teaching with climate change. You might also, if it's relevant, put down the grade that you're also teaching these kind of topics with, or if you're early childhood, ECE or post-secondary, it'd be great just to kind of see who's in the audience here. I don't see hands yet, but I do see some comments coming in.
Did you put it back in this corner? Okay. Open that thing. Well, I'm throwing stuff over there, so I don't want it to get full and then.
So yes, we do have some folks. Okay, in the younger years too, kindergarten, grade 3, online, of course, right now, outdoor education. That's awesome. So, when we built this program, Brit and I, it's really been a labor of love, and Rachel's come in to help provide some great supports that are a complementary resource on eco-anxiety that she'll get to at the end here. We thought beyond grade 3, and we also recognize that across our provincial and territorial school curriculums and schools, it's not always prevalent at such a young grade, but how can you connect it? So with Brit's, national teacher network of teachers that are using these indoor garden-based programs, and they have the setup, they have their own Little Green Thumbs garden, it's certainly an area where they're really passionate about learning more. So what we decided to do was create a series of 8 lessons with 2 hands-on activities or role plays or discussions per lesson under these themes that are taking students, and we'll show you the arc in a little bit here, but really taking them to slowly introduce the idea of climate change and the complexity of that on the environment and our plants. Great, thanks, Brit. Yeah.
Sorry, I haven't did anyways.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's great. I'm going to run out of time if not. So, for example, we have questions, and we put together a number of different videos that connect the dots per almost every single of the 8 lessons has a video. We close off the last 2 with a PowerPoint and more of a group discussion. And then, as I mentioned, this My Climate Story Guide, which Rachel will get into, tackling eco-anxiety for young kids. So go ahead there, Brit, again. So ideas of just what do plants and soil have to do with climate change? We're really trying to help kids connect the dots. One of the fascinating things for me building this program with Brit is the idea that whether you're in a very urban setting or a very rural setting, whether you're in a school that has 4 walls and you're hardly ever outdoors, the classic asphalt playgrounds of places like Montreal or in some parts of Toronto. For a lot of kids, some of the key biodiversity they actually see every day are the plants around them. Even just looking out the school window or classroom window and seeing that the way the different plants are interacting with weather, particularly, climate's a whole other topic, but we ease them into that idea. But the idea that plants are something they can care for, plants are pretty low maintenance. Of course, if you have a green thumb, it helps, and we're trying to encourage kids to develop green thumbs. But it's something really tactile, tangible. The harm of interacting with the plant is a lot lower than a living thing. And they're pretty consistent because they don't normally move around too much. I don't know if you want to add anything to that there, Brent.
Yeah, I think that really does sum it up. For us, the presence of plants and soil, specifically in the grade 3 and 4 curriculums, is a really important inroad for us into the classroom, and just they become a really great foundation for tangible ways of looking at how changes to the environment directly affect us. So looking at plant needs and plant adaptations, and well, what happens if those needs can't be met, or those adaptations that plants have developed for a particular climate or particular habitat, that habitat changes. And so it just becomes a really good look at some of the some of the causes of climate change, some of the impacts, and then some of the solutions, which happen to all do with plants and soils. So it's kind of an exciting opportunity for us.
Awesome. So lesson arc here. So as we develop these lessons, the idea of planting the seeds, it's not until lesson 4 that we'll get into climate change. And then we move away from climate change 101. We don't get too deep into the complexities of this many tentacled beast that we call climate change. We move quite quickly then into ideas of solutions and the actions that kids can take that'll matter and help. So among this, we start with plants, planet, people. Why are plants important in our everyday lives? Where we see plants around us, the wood around us, the linen, the cotton sheets, whatever, the food, of course. And then we move into plant needs, which is a signature piece the Little Green Thumbs has done for many years on their lawns. And I think we have a slide on lawns later. Plant adaptations, and then move into, okay, the plants have to adapt. What happens in climate change, and how do the plant needs and how do plants have to adapt as part of climate change? Then lessons 6 to 8, we get a whole lesson that looks on soil and the importance of soil as a huge carbon sink and a really vital thing for climate change and preventing erosion and the role of soil and the microorganisms. Then we get into food waste as a really good topical thing that whether you have a yard or not to protect your soil around you, you can certainly decide to not waste food and that huge impact it has. And then at the end, we get students and teachers to come together and have a bit of a discussion on what kinds of solutions they can take up. And then the idea is moving at the end of all this, discussions and role plays and drama games and such into, okay, what can we do together as an action project? Perfect. Next slide, Brit. So opportunities presented by the resource. For us, it's a really big key piece, and we had focus groups with teachers, the Little Green Thumbs teachers, kind of discussing what kinds of challenges do you see, especially with climate change, but also plant-based learning and connections that are important for you, and of course for us as well, having stronger First Nations, Métis, and Inuit connections. Of course, whenever it's a pan-Canadian project, you really have to, it's hard to really represent as best you can hundreds of Indigenous communities, cultures, language groups across Canada that are so diverse, but trying to give at least some different opportunities and pieces to connect the dots for teachers specifically. And also ensuring, because so many Indigenous cultures have such a strong power in storytelling, but ensuring that you're not telling someone else's story. We try to ensure within the resource to put in some science connections into especially the videos, but also put in some Indigenous connections. So try and see, talking about Indigenous communities, thinking of 7 generations ahead, thinking of, for example, when we're looking at food security, talking about the North and the challenges of food security there. We incorporate into the resource a couple lessons that focus more on this. But also our key thing was let's take it through, especially to grade 3 level, to incorporate great stories and literature that will help. Maybe doesn't have the exact same concept you're teaching, but is close enough in terms of bringing in some Indigenous worldviews into this. The other thing we're excited about is we're hoping in the final, we're just finishing up the layout of this, of course, but to have an activity where they're doing some pointillism using one of Christy Belcourt's art pieces called So Much Depends on Who Holds the Shovel. Getting kids to have a discussion, think about, if you were to hold the shovel, if you had the power to plant whatever you could to help promote native species and all this, what would you plant? And what happens when someone, a city worker who's doing school gardens or, different people hold different shovels in our community and get to decide what gets planted? What are their concerns and why are they choosing what they're doing, and how maybe could we shift into more climate friendly, which is almost always, local Indigenous plants instead. I don't know, Brit, if you want to add anything to that, because it's something you're really passionate about.
Yeah, I think it just the opportunity was there. Such an opportunity for us as a program that works specifically with the land and specifically with working with nature, that more than we hear from teachers all the time, they really want those connections, and they ask us, how can we do this better? And we work specifically with consultants and teachers that are in our network, Indigenous and Métis teachers that kind of can help us draw those connections as well. And so more than, and so we feel like it's an obligation, but then it's more than an obligation because it's this incredible opportunity in this particular resource to do that. So I'm really happy that we were able to make that a big focus of it.
Do you want to speak a bit to other considerations too while you have the floor?
Yeah, so yeah, the other considerations for us were really to try to make it an interdisciplinary. So we're working with, we kind of focus on those elementary classrooms. I do think that a lot of what's in this resource can be adapted, even the videos, for example, for grades outside of that key 3 to 6 is what we sort of said was sort of those key areas. But that there's such an opportunity for interdisciplinary. So like I said, that science curriculum is really our inroad, but how can we really look at these particular lessons and activities in the resource and bring art in and bring English literature in and bring all of these other aspects in to really try to make it a full resource, and then rural and urban context. So not just looking at necessarily a rural look at, or even just looking at like wild spaces and nature and how do we preserve in context, but really taking that idea of our natural world and centering it where we are in our habitat, whether that is a rural or an urban habitat as well. And then this is that lesson arc. Did you want me to go through this, Adam, or do you want to go through this?
There's a bunch of them. So why don't you start by doing a few and then I can jump in when you want.
And we can just hop in. So what we want to do with this is bring you through. So these are all stills from our animated videos, and we'll put up the link at the end as well. So you can actually have a look at a clip of one of the animated videos, check out a little bit more about the resource, and also sign up for when it launches in 2 weeks or a couple weeks. So this is our first video. And so it's really about the interconnection between plants, people, and our planet. And so what we're really looking to do here is give students an overall look at all the interconnections between the plants and the people and our planet. And we also touch a little bit on climate, because this is going to be important to know, to understand that idea of different climates across Canada, which then make for different habitats, and looking specifically at some of those plants that exist in those different habitats. And it's really setting the stage then. We're also looking at built habitats as well. So built habitats as well as natural habitats. But it's really going to set that stage for lesson 2 and the activities there, where we talk specifically about plant needs. And so we use this acronym, which is LAWNS. It's the first letter of those words: light, air, water, nutrients, and space. So we really use LAWNS as this idea of what do most plants need in their environment in order to survive, in order to thrive. And so when we're working indoors with our little green thumbs teachers, this is really important because they're really acting as nature to provide these needs. But what we're really wanting students to understand is that in any of those habitats and in any of those climates across Canada, the plants that live there have to meet their needs. And so these are the needs that have to be met. And then we go to lesson 3, where we're talking about plant adaptations. And we really love this because if you are a grade 3 teacher, or maybe in Alberta, if you're teaching grade 4, this is directly connected to that science curriculum that you're talking about. So it's kind of an easy inroad. But our hope is that you can find pieces of this. You might want to go as intensely into it, but this does really set that foundation. Number 3 is plant adaptation. So we're talking about how do plants meet their needs in those environments? Well, how they do that is they have these adaptations. So we're looking at rainforest plants, and why do they have these, canopies, or why do they have fenestrations, so the holes in their large leaves to let water through, or a desert plant like a cactus that doesn't have leaves for transpiration. So we're looking at those adaptations, and those adaptations exist for plants to meet their needs in an environment. Just like we talk about if we're going hiking in the mountains, we grab a sun hat and we grab hiking boots and we'll grab water. But plants, they can't just simply grab what they need if they move to a different habitat, or if the habitat changes or if the climate changes. They have these adaptations that have developed over thousands of years in order for them to survive in a place. And we do talk a little bit about native plants, as well as plants that we may have introduced as well, because we want to have that lens of also like food crops that maybe aren't native plants, but have also come from other places. Lesson 4, Adam, did you let me know if you ever want to just take over on
You're
any of this?
nailing it, Brit. Keep
All right.
going.
Okay. Well, lesson 4 is where we start talking about climate change, and it is a big complex topic, and that's why we're so lucky again, and we're thrilled to have the work that Rachel has done with My Climate Story, because there is so much more than just the science of climate change, where it's in the news. We have heard the saying, no disasters before grade 4. So this idea where we really shouldn't necessarily maybe be talking to kids about this stuff, but sort of too late for that is our feeling. Kids are hearing these words, they know about them, they're hearing them from their parents talking, from the media. And so we're trying to take what they can developmentally understand at this age, and understand about what climate change is. So like the real basic stuff, talking about talking about the climate warming and why that's happening in terms of some of the greenhouse gases, and trying to link a lot of it back to food, back to plants, as much as we can as well. And then we do talk about photosynthesis. A lot of these concepts arise in the videos. When we were working with our focus groups, teachers said, we were worried, is it too much that we're talking about this at this grade level? And a lot of what the teachers in our group said is, mention it. If it's developmentally appropriate, we'll talk about it again, and what we can choose then to do those activities that go into it. If not, it might just be something that the kids just kind of goes over their head, and it's not a big deal. And so that was the advice that we were getting from our teachers at that time. So there's like I said, you can sort of scale up these videos and lessons up and down, because there are certain things mentioned that you can choose to pull out a little bit more. Why we want to talk about this is it really sets that stage for, obviously for climate change and talking about the release of greenhouse gases, but sort of everything being made of carbon as well. And breathing out carbon dioxide, breathing in oxygen. So some of those basic concepts we go into in 4. In 5, we bring it back to its plant needs and climate change. So we specifically address that idea of when the habitat changes, it's maybe harder for plants to meet their needs. And these are some of the consequences that might happen. We don't want to sit in that space too long. So we quickly do transition in 6, 7, and then 8 into solutions. 6, we specifically talk about soil as a solution to climate change, and it gives us a great opportunity to talk about, carbon, talk a little bit about how some of natural environments act as carbon sinks, so as a direct solution to climate change. And then we talk about food waste in 7. And so this is just a little bit of that food chain. We talk about where's food lost along the chain, what are the impacts of that, what else is lost when we waste food, so all the water. And we have lots of did you knows, lots of interesting kind of ideas for the students to visualize, how much water actually is that in bathtubs, when we waste one apple, or when we waste one piece of food, and then everything else we might be wasting, even in terms of labor and the energy to produce it, and then the fuel. Number 8 is really about solutions and who is doing what to help and how can we help. So this is becomes more of a service learning opportunity for the class or as individuals to specifically look at how can we make a difference, and what can we do in our own lives. And so like I mentioned, with the work that Rachel has done, like, I'm gonna let Rachel talk specifically about my climate story, because I think it's really important. And lesson 8 is obviously draws a lot on the work that my climate story builds through the lessons, because it's really about helping kids understand what is important to them and then how they can take action. So that lesson 8, it's not necessarily set up in the same way as a lot of the other lessons, but more of a service learning. I'm going to quickly look at the resource. Or Adam, did you want to actually go through kind of this quick look at the resource, and then we'll hear from Rachel.
Perfect. Yeah. And so I think probably do just a couple minutes here, then we'll move to Rachel, then a Q&A. So again, there's 8 lessons, there's 7 videos and a PowerPoint for the one, of course. Like, there's good solid videos that accompany each one with some questions and pieces there. This is just to give you an idea of what the lesson plan looks like. So we have a big idea, suggested steps, some guiding questions, I know, I can, I understand pieces. Then from there, we have the video that you can watch, and we kind of suggest a spot where you might want to integrate into the lessons or discussion. That also includes kind of moments where you might want to stop and check for understanding or have a bit more of a class discussion going on. As part of that video piece too, we've kind of thrown in a bit more of a science connection, because we recognize a lot of teachers get really frightened by climate change because it's hard to know what's actually happening. So we try to bring in a couple more pieces that connect some key scientific principles or kind of intriguing or interesting facts on plants and climate change and the connection there. If you just want to go back a second there, Brit, did I miss anything from that other page? Those are kind of our key pieces. And then, like I said, there's Indigenous connections, so a bit of a shorter piece there on, we have the idea of the Western science, but then we're also trying to throw in some Indigenous knowledge or Indigenous perspective on climate change or on plants that come through, linking to a bunch of resources and videos. And then we have extension activities, but we also have, the bread and butter of this, which is worksheets and all the supports and kind of pieces you'll need to actually do some fun, cool activities. So as example, this one here is a Venn diagram where students have to write down the needs of people versus needs of plants, which ones actually come together to kind of understand that, there is a lot of ones that actually fit in that middle both section of that Venn diagram. Other kind of fun activities we're really excited to talk about. We have a plant health chart where the kids kind of take up the role of a plant doctor. So you either bring in X number of plants or look around the plants in your classroom or go outside. And the nice thing about this is whether you have a garden or not, the idea is if you have a plant nearby, you can probably do 90% of these activities, if not more. So the plant health chart is to get them to look at lawns. So the idea that plants need these 5 things. So light, air, water, nutrients, and space, and for them to actually check up on plant health. I see a couple questions in the chat. I'll get to some of them throughout, but yeah, the resources are bilingual, so they will be available. Exactly, thanks, Brit. Completely available in French too. It's just going through translation right now, as well as the videos will be translated too. I don't know, Brit, if you maybe next slide there. So much to talk about. We're really excited. There's pretty much like 15 to 16 activities here. So I guess we'll move into Rachel then. Rachel, we have a couple minutes here. Do you want to chat a bit about the My Climate Story complementing activities to the lesson there?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. Yeah, this is a really exciting project to be involved with. As they mentioned in my intro, my name is Rachel, and I've created an organization and a platform called Eco-Anxious Stories. And it's a web-based platform geared to create resources and storytelling opportunities to help people feel a sense of belonging to the climate movement and to really get under the surface of how we feel about this huge problem and what it means to us as human beings. We're not psychologists ourselves, but we work with a lot of psychologists to make sure that we're in line with the best advice for how to normalize these feelings and not just pathologize them. While some might need some really specific professional support to navigate and cope with the feelings they're feeling, a lot of us just need space to talk about this and connect the dots. And we believe that starting that young and trying to embed this in curriculum really helps kids feel like they're not alone in this and helps alleviate some of that tension. And so this initiative is about bringing that lens to this type of project. How do we bring an eco-anxious lens to plants, people, and planetary health? And so we're really looking at what already matters to kids and the choices that they have and the power that they have within this narrative that we're trying to help them feel that they belong to. So we're not just talking about sort of the human impacts in the abstract, but we're really trying to bring it home and help kids navigate how they personally feel about this and what their personal power is in this moment in time. You can go to the next slide. So the way that we do this is really trying to provide tools and resources for navigating this space between the science and the storytelling of climate change. And so we're really trying, like I said, to evoke this sense that this is a long narrative that started before these kids were on the scene, before they became characters, but they're a part of it at this moment in time. And it is going to stretch on into their future and into the future generations. And so we're at a really exciting moment and turning point in this story. And we want to give the kids a sense that they are in it and that they have a role to play. Go to the next slide. And the power of using storytelling as a framework for this is that it doesn't bind us to just the conceptual or kind of knowledge space. We're really trying to engage hearts and hands and feet in this approach. So really helping kids identify what they love about the world and about their lives that connects to the material that they're learning about. And what kind of emotions bubble up when those things, when those needs and those adaptations are under threat. And so we want to get kids to the point where they really know what they can do about it, what they can change, and what they can share with each other as a way of building power and strength to face these kinds of problems. Go to the next one. So we've created an activity and resource that marries each of the lessons that Brit and Adam just went through. It marries the kind of level of relationship between plants and climate that have been introduced in the scientific material. And so we're helping kids understand that this isn't just a story about plants, this is a story about people and about them as individual people as well, and that they have a setting in this story and a role to play within it as a key character. And then when we dive more into the climate science, we really get into the heart of things and talk about how it feels to be a character in this story, how it feels to have choices ahead of us, some of which are scary or uncertain. And so we have some slides in a second here that show how we try to get under the surface of these feelings and give kids a chance to kind of dive deep. But of course, we want them to come out the other side, come up to the surface with a sense of mobilization and empowerment. And so we have some resources that really help them craft their own story and look to the stories of other young people who have taken action in the areas of soil and food and planetary health in a way that helps it kind of connect the dots and bring it home. And go to the next one. So this slide I won't spend too much time on, there's a lot here, but this just gives a picture of the overarching framework that helps us think about this distance, if you take the top part of the slide here, this distance between what we know, that climate change is happening and requires urgent action, to that green blob where climate solutions are taking root each day. But it's hard to move directly to that space when we don't go under the surface and really dig into what this means to us and what matters about it, what's at stake, what we want and what it'll take. So each of the pieces underneath that brown and green blob are trying to piece those pieces together and help move through that story. So each of the resources are optional. You don't have to engage with each one. You can pick and choose what fits right with your classroom if you'd like. But the goal is to sort of come along this arc that Brit and Adam have outlined and really move through how we as people feel about our place in this narrative. And so there's a piece for each lesson. Go ahead. And the other cool thing we've included with this is a resource dedicated just for teachers and educators. And so this is about preparing yourself as the person that's brokering this story to children to reflect on what your story is going into this and maybe some of your anxieties about teaching this material. Maybe they don't have as much to do with your knowledge and awareness or confidence about the material. Maybe they have more to do with the socioeconomic and political layout of your community and how this kind of information lands and what it seems to uncover about our identities and our values. And so these prompts are just tools to help teachers think about what they're coming in with and where their anxieties lie so that they can be honest about that with the kids where appropriate, but also have some nice cues for moving through that story to really think about what their role is as an educator and also what the role is of the kids in the classroom to take action because of what we know. You can go to the next one. Just a couple minutes here left. I just wanted to touch on this particular slide kind of shows what's happening in around lesson 4 or 5 when we're really digging into the emotions surrounding climate and giving kids a chance to name how they feel. Maybe they don't feel anxious, or maybe this isn't something that's been keeping them up at night. But perhaps there are kids who really need a chance to talk about how they're feeling, or at least have it recognized that they might be feeling complex or big feelings about the stuff that they're learning. And so this work is based heavily on the work of Carolyn Hickman, who's an excellent psychotherapist who really is gearing materials towards kids about climate anxiety. And there's some connections we're making to her great work. Go ahead, Brit. And where we try to leave kids towards the end of the lesson sessions is kind of grounded in this work around public narrative by Marshall Gans. And it's around this concept that if we can put ourselves in this bigger story, it gives us a sense of what we can do now and where we're headed. And so we're trying to give kids prompts to be able to tell stories about how they can be, stewards of the soil, not as individual heroes, but as part of bigger teams and communities of people working together to make the world better than it would otherwise be, and to do that around plants and soil and the material that they're learning about. But these prompts kind of help not just focus on the actions we can take in classrooms to sort of emulate some of the larger scale action that we want to happen at a systems level, but also literally talk about how we are a part of that and how we're trying to use our story to influence other people. So going a little bit more into that space of political or systems level action, but still at a level that's appropriate for grades 3 to 6. Go ahead, Brit. I think we're just about done here. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. Yeah. Adam, did you want to close off with any? Actually, one thing I will just mention first is the link that I have on the PowerPoint isn't working. So sorry about that, everybody, but I did put the correct link into the chat. So it's just littlegreenthumbs.org/plants and climate change, but there's just a dash between each word. So the link is there. That's where you can go if you want to just have a quick look at the animated video, and you can sign up there. And then we'll actually send you an email when the full resource launches.
Yeah, not much to add, I think. Thanks again, Rachel. Like the idea then that we're trying to take this science, right, and really bring it and connect the dots to people's capacity and building agency for the kids especially. And that idea then that, you could take the whole My Climate story in of itself and, adapt it as needed, or just focus on that if you wanted to. You don't have to use it. I see a question from Jasmine, great question. You don't have to use the My Climate story to connect with the People's Plan on Climate Change. However you want it, we help you connect the dots in the teacher resource, and in the lesson by lesson, it will link back to what the My Climate story would be if you want to incorporate it. But again, it's really up to you. We could see, potentially, especially older years, the examples we have of different, climate heroes or climate action people that maybe inspire you, and then getting the students to then think of their own climate story. That in and of itself could be a full activity for the older years, especially. And then with the younger years as well, I don't know if we mentioned it much, we do have this idea of a climate high five. So kind of 5 key things to know about climate change. So we incorporate a lot of different concepts and topics and tools to help the kids connect the dots and hopefully make it quite fun. So, there's drama and role play games where they have to create their own plant and then have that plant with certain particular needs, and then walk around the room to different environments that would fit that plant's needs. The plant doctor activity. So we tried to incorporate quite a few kind of fun little things for them to try out as well. So as Brit mentioned, please sign up for it. It'll be out in a couple of weeks in English, puis en français. It'll be just a little bit later for all the translation, but it'll be available in both. And even if you just want to take the videos and share it with folks, go for it. So yeah, we have some time for questions or comments. Hopefully you're as excited about this as we have been working on it. So if you have any questions that we haven't answered yet, we'll take them.
You have 2 questions unanswered in the chat, Adam.
Okay. There's one earlier about experiential learning and Indigenous content. So we've been quite cautious with the building of incorporating Indigenous resources, given, of course, the complexity of Canada, and really a strong push that should be done by educators to connect with local elders, knowledge keepers, and communities, and really understand you know, for example, what native plants or indigenous plants are around you, which may not be in another spot. However, with the lesson, with the resources, especially suggested children's books, we wanted to get some cool themes out that would help tell that story across Canada. So, you know, there's a lot on grandmothers and showing their grandchildren different medicines around and different ways that plants were used. There's a whole kind of piece on, we have an Inuit story as well. We have an international indigenous story from, I think it's from the Amazon. So we tried to incorporate some good ideas, but also really recognize that going back, you know, these are great experiential learning, local place-based education activities or approaches that you should probably take. Is there another one that I missed?
I saw a question in the chat about my climate story for children as young as kindergarten. I'll just say we've designed this with grade 3s as sort of the youngest person in mind. But what Eco-Anxious Stories does is essentially bring a framework for how we could approach any type of storytelling. So I'd be quite keen to connect with any teachers who felt like they wanted to modify for younger years to sort of have an exploratory conversation about what that could look like if anyone is keen.
Adam, people are asking if you guys will share the slides in the chat.
Yeah, Brit, that's a question. I know they're quite big slides. We will have this recorded as well, so you're more than welcome to access it after. And I think I have the attendance list. I may not be able to necessarily email out to everybody, but Brit, any thoughts on how we can share the slides the best way for folks?
Yeah, I wonder, it is quite a large PowerPoint just because of our graphics, but maybe I could just quickly put it into a PDF. I mean, we could definitely share it on the Little Green Thumbs. Or will you have a place with Ecom where all the resources will be housed afterwards, or?
To some degree, what might actually be best is, and I know there's 40 people or so, or 30 people now in the room, but if you like the slides directly, are they okay to contact you, Brit?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we can put the slides into a blog post on like Little Green Thumbs website. So if you just go littlegreenthumbs.org, maybe after this, I'll just quickly throw it onto into a PDF, and then we'll just make it a blog post so that people can access it as well. And then
Awesome.
most of the information is on that website webpage right now. So if there was a specific thing you were looking for, then please also feel free to reach out to me, and it's just Brit@littlegreenthumbs.org.
And Rachel's info as well as in the chat too. So anything on Eco-Anxious and the pieces that she put together or collaborating further. I know Rachel does stuff with municipalities and stuff too, and I think has done some work with school divisions. So if you're curious to have her come and present to you, by all means, reach out to her at ecoanxious.ca in her email there.
Yeah, maybe one thing we'll mention too, if you want to, we'll be launching the resource in May. And then what we're hoping to do is after we've launched it to then maybe leave 2 weeks of launching, but then have another webinar that goes into the nuts and bolts of the resource. So really how you can get the most out of it. And Rachel will be talking a little bit about my climate story then as well, but it's quite a unique piece, and there's a lot of cool stuff in it. So what we'd like to do is then have an additional webinar where we're going to invite Rachel to then talk more about this piece and how it relates to this resource, but maybe also how you can use it as its own standalone resource to have some of these conversations too. So so stay in touch with that too. So all that information will come if you sign up for the launch of the resource.
Thanks everyone for all the nice comments in the chat. We're very excited about this to be launching up for you to plan for the future, and hopefully it serves you well. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was very interesting to learn about all of it, and I think, as I can see in the chat, that people are really enjoy it as well. So I'm just going to invite you to come and see our Ecom Awards presentation right after this, and we will take a quick break of 10 minutes, and then after it's the award ceremony and the conference closing by Nancy Rowe. Sorry, I speak French, so I was not sure how to pronounce that name. So thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.